Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a comparison between the Sony A6600 on the left and the RX10 Mark IV on the right. Now, I already know what most of you are thinking, which is why compare these? These are two incredibly different cameras, and they don't really share space. But I would argue the opposite, which is that they do share space. After all, when it comes to pricing, a little under $1,400 US for the A6600 that launches at the end of this month. We're almost there. And the RX10 Mark IV is priced at a little under $1,600 US. So with some time and the RX10 Mark IV seeing more aggressive sale prices, I think these are going to be about the same in terms of pricing, at least here in the States. Of course, the key is with the 6600, you'll need to pick up glass, and that's where things get expensive or really expensive, depending on what you need. And if you're trying to replicate what is built onto the RX10, well, then things are going to get really expensive. So in terms of specifications, a mirrorless APS-C sensor inside the A6600. It's not a new sensor, not a brand spanking new product for the A6600, but everything else about the A6600 has been improved over any other APS-C E-mount camera that Sony's ever made, and that's why they called it flagship. Not because it changes the game, but when it comes to Sony's APS-C cameras, there is no camera that is better than the A6600. Now, I know many of you out there, and I've addressed this in my coverage of the A6600, were hoping for more from this camera, whether it was a newer sensor, higher megapixel count, a new EVF. I'm in on all of those things. I wish it had it, but when we just look at what the A6600 represents, we got a new battery, even though it's not a new battery. It's a new battery to the A6000 series in the Type Z, which is the same thing that we'd find in their full-frame counterparts, the last generation and current. That's a big deal. More than twice the battery life. We now have microphone and headphone jacks, well, singles. I mean, we don't have plural, but that's already a big improvement. I wish that in the SD card slot, we would have gotten a UHS 2 slot. I don't need two compartments, but that would have been nice. I also would have liked to have seen them integrate a Type C port here, but I'm nitpicking. The reality is that between its in-body image stabilization, its real-time autofocus tracking and video, eye detection for humans and animals in the still world as well, I mean, this camera is about as complete as an APS-C camera can get. And of course, it has something that began with the A6400, which is the flip-around display for vlogging and self-framing, so that you don't have to have a field monitor. We don't have a flash, which is a downside, but overall, this camera's great. I mean, we didn't get new 4K capability. It's mostly just the fact that we have improved autofocus, the best they've ever integrated into an APS-C camera, and $1,400 US, it's really $13.99 or whatever. I'm not a used car salesman. That is a very high price point for this camera, but Sony knows there is nothing else exactly like it on the market, and certainly not in their lineup. As many of you will argue, the 6400 is basically the same camera, but no in-body image stabilization. Well, it's not. It's not basically the same camera. The ergonomics are not similar. To my knowledge, the weather sealing is supposedly better on this. I haven't dunked it in water. Not that any of you should ever do that. I was being sarcastic. But, I mean, ergonomics are better here. I would argue that, just having the headphone and microphone combo on here also makes it a better tool in just about every way. So it is a best-in-class device for the APS-C mirrorless world. Now, with the RX10 Mark IV, clearly this is all about not wanting to have to worry about accessories. And even though this camera's battery, the Type Z, is far superior to the one in here, because this is still sporting the same battery that this could have if they hadn't migrated to the Z, which is the W series. So you're not going to get as good battery life here, but you won't have to buy a lens. Also, here you have a flash. That is arguably better than any of the flashes that are on board any of Sony's other APS-C offerings that do have a flash, where it would normally be up here. So remember, if you're trying to replicate the range that the RX10 offers, which is all the way out going from wide to 600 millimeters, you're going to be spending a lot of money on glass. Even if you go legacy and adapt, whatever, you're going to be spending a lot of money, and your bag's going to get very heavy. So that really is the deciding factor, I think, for whether or not the A6600 is the camera for you. Now, the reason I'm comparing it to the RX10 Mark IV is because well, frankly, it's one of my favorite bridge style cameras. Yes, it's a 1-inch sensor. It's not an APS-C sensor, but they're not worlds apart. They're not miles apart. I mean, yes, the APS-C offers a lot more, but I'd liken it to the difference almost from APS-C to full frame. So I think it's a natural comparison. I mean, I would like the sensor to be a little bit larger, but then what would we be into? Micro Four Thirds? So basically that 1-inch sensor, which is the backbone of not only all previous gen RX10s, but of course the RX100 lineup, and has been improved. This camera has, has hybrid phase and contrast autofocus detection. It doesn't have anywhere near the coverage of the sensor that the A6600 has. But again, we have a built-in lens that is very good. There's no ND filter, old news with the RX10 lineup. Everyone's been complaining about that for a long time since this camera launched, and this has been on the market for a while. But this camera excels in the video and still world for what it is, and it's the only camera that you'll need. Now, if you're a professional and you've been watching this, you must like my content, because I don't know what else to say, because I don't think pros would necessarily be looking at either of these except for B cameras. These are backups or B-roll material. And that's not to say the A6600 isn't competent. It is, but when I say it's overpriced, that should tell you everything you need to know. It's not a pro tool. Doesn't mean pros won't use it. Same applies to the RX10 Mark IV. It's a bridge-style point-and-shoot camera. That doesn't mean that pros won't like this thing. I mean, it's got the ergonomics that I think most would want. The video record button is where it should be. Yes, it has an EVF that reminds me of inexpensive cyber shots, but that's not going to stop me, because this is just a dynamo that has it all, and I'm really excited to see what Sony comes out with next. But in the world we live in today, this is what we've got. And guess what? We have a headphone and microphone jack. We don't have Type-C, but it's basically the same exact port selection that you get with the A6600. And guess what else? The battery location, same place, not that that's surprising, but we actually get an SD card slot where it belongs, on the side of the body, like the full frame offerings that I wish we would have gotten as an improvement to the A6600, but they made the body just big enough for it to be another class. Now, we don't have an LCD screen back here that flips all the way around. You're not going to be vlogging in the same way you could with the A6600, but this camera covers every base. I mean, we even have a readout, something Sony doesn't incorporate into any of their pro-grade equipment. It reminds me of other brands, but this is all good. I mean, this, in my opinion, is one of the few point-and-shoot cameras on the market. It's the only one for me, but for many of you out there, I believe it's one of the few that could be your go-everywhere camera. Yes, it's large. It's not a small camera, and that's another thing I would compare, is that when it comes to weight, once you have a lens on the A6600, these things are getting closer than you might think based on, just sheer size, footprint. But, I mean, the glass on this does weigh quite a bit. But this is really that all-in-one solution that can do it all, that you could use for anything, still, video. It doesn't have the autofocus prowess of the A6600, but it's got the versatility that the A6600 can't give you. No interchangeable lens camera can give you this versatility, and that is why this is so expensive. It's because it really does put out great results. Now, do I wish they would make this with a larger sensor, like throw in an APS-C, or God forbid they reincarnate the RX1 into something like this? That, to me, would be a dream camera. Sony, if you're listening, listen well. Put a full-frame sensor in something like this. Give us a higher-end piece of glass, of course. Make it $5,000. I bet you can sell more than you can make. I really believe that. And it doesn't have to be $5,000. Don't listen to me on that. You can make it $3,000 if you want, but I don't think you will. And, of course, the lens is going to be the most complicated part, in my opinion. But remember, when it comes to capturing 4K video, no limitations on the A6600. We have limitations here on the RX10, but there's no overheating issue, at least in my experience with either of these. Doesn't mean they can't overheat. It means they aren't prone to it, which, if you know about Sony's history, you know about their cameras being prone to overheating. So we don't have that problem with either of these, but of course, the stills and 4K video that come out of either of these are going to look better out of the A6600. But again, plan on spending $3,000 to $4,000 easily on glass to make this work, maybe over that. I mean, if you were to incorporate a G Master lens, $100 to $400, you're looking at $2,500. Incorporate a a lens I just got for review and have been testing with these, the G Series 200 to 600, and that's another $2,000. And that's what it would take. I mean, granted, there's a crop factor to come into play, but if I'm doing 35 millimeter equivalents, this is 600 millimeters. So, you know, do you want to carry this around? Or do you want to carry this around? There's a really big difference, obviously. And there's also a really big difference in performance. But for many of you out there who are not pros, who are hobbyists, enthusiasts, this is going to be enough. And you're probably interested in this too. Or the 6400 or the 6500, whatever it may be. You may already own it. I'm just here to let all of you know that realistically, if I was forced into choosing between these two, personally, I would still go with the RX10 because it's the do-it-all. And if you're traveling, I'll enjoy my trip much more. And I won't feel like I compromised, that I left something behind. Now, it's not to say I wouldn't enjoy having this. I would. But to me, this is the competent decision between must I have the flexibility, capability of mirrorless, interchangeable, or am I satisfied by what the RX10 can deliver? And in my opinion, I am satisfied, even though the A6600 is the better camera, and I've got the glass, so that tells you what you need to know. But if I absolutely must have the best, then the A6600 will rule at my back's expense, right? And at convenience and flexibility when it comes to having to lug around two of these, or at least one of them, clearly, and a wide lens, and then I've just about got the range of the RX10. But I think you get it. That's the end of the story here on the 6600 versus the RX10 Mark IV. You may hear my puppy. It's time for another walk. He's keeping me at it every hour. Hope you enjoyed the video. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.